Hello and welcome to Daybreak on A News this Tuesday morning. My name is Atim Tongana, coming to you live from Baku in Azerbaijan. Here are the headlines. Washington is widening secondary sanctions on Iran as Tehran vows retaliation against the new economic offensive. The U.S. has removed Syria from its terrorism sponsors list, clearing a major obstacle to investment and economic recovery. And oil prices are holding steady as markets assess the impact of expanded U.S. sanctions on Iran. All right, we begin with the U.S. conflict this morning with Iran. So Iran is facing a new wave of U.S. economic pressure as Washington expands its sanctions campaign and warns that military options remain on the table. The restrictions come amid talks hanging in the balance as escalations between the two countries continued.
The U.S. Treasury Department has broadened the range of Iran-related activities that could trigger secondary sanctions, including business linked to shipping, technology, and digital assets. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned that countries continuing to trade with Tehran could eventually face restrictions on access to the U.S. dollar-based financial system. Washington has described the campaign as an economic D-Day, aimed at further isolating Iran. The latest measures targeted nearly 60 Iran-linked entities accused of supporting Tehran's nuclear and missile programs, cyber activities, and oil shipments. Companies in China, the UAE, Singapore, and other countries, including a cooking oil refinery in France, were among those affected. The United States has maintained sanctions on Iran for decades, targeting areas including oil revenues, access to military-related components and businesses linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Tehran has rejected the new pressure campaign. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Washington must change its approach, warning that coercion and pressure would only complicate efforts to resolve disputes. Iran's economy chief Ali Madanizadeh called the looming measures another failure. He said that Tehran had anticipated them and has a two-year plan. Iran has also signaled proposals to strengthen economic ties with partners such as China. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi described Beijing as Iran's first economic partner, saying closer cooperation through frameworks such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS could help expand economic resilience. At the same time, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Washington was not ruling out military action against Iran, including in the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran has warned of retaliation. A spokesperson for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said U.S. interests and key energy routes could be targeted if Iranian infrastructure came under attack. Despite a recent lull in major military strikes, there is still little sign of a diplomatic breakthrough as tensions remain high over the Strait of Hormuz and regional security.
So Pakistan and Iran made significant progress in talks that focused on the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran and a path to peace. That's according to Islamabad's Interior Minister on Tuesday at the end of a visit to Tehran. According to a Pakistani military statement, the discussions between the two sides focused on measures to prevent further escalation, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and an expedited termination of the conflict. It's after a meeting between the country's army chief Asim Munir and the Iranian leadership on Monday. It added that the two sides also exchanged views on regional peace and the way to arrive to a negotiated settlement to the dispute. The United Nations says disruptions to key maritime routes are putting further pressure on global trade, energy supplies, and food security. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the protection of shipping routes and proposed a mechanism to help ensure the movement of essential goods.
Today, conflicts in different regions are converging in their impact on the world's most vulnerable people. In the Middle East, ongoing attacks and the disruption of maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea around Bab el-Mandab are constraining the movement of energy, fertilizers, and other essential commodities. In the conflict following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, attacks are threatening shipping routes vital for the export of oil, grain, and other agricultural products. These crises are choking arteries of global trade and squeezing the global food system especially hard. The result is clear: higher prices, deepening hunger, weaker harvests, and greater suffering, especially for the world's most vulnerable people.
Joining me in studio is Tural Akhundov, a research fellow at the Crescent Research Center. Pleasure to have you here this morning in studio. Thank you so much and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation.
All right, so I want us to begin immediately with the announcement by America. Yesterday, we heard from the Treasury Secretary Bessent coming out to call the sanctions to Iran. He basically called them Operation Economic Outcast. They have very tough language for what they are doing against Iran. Obviously, this is a move to cut Iran's financial links. And also what's interesting is that they are also targeting secondary sanctions to any countries that are in partnership with Iran. I want to immediately get your reaction. What did you think when you listened to that announcement?
Yes, well, a lot of speeches about sanctions. They call it the economic D-Day, and I think that it's going to be really tough for Americans to handle those new sanctions, because first of all, we have to understand that Iran has been under sanctions already for around 47 years. And I can say that the more time they spend under sanctions, the more, this shock absorption ability they gain. And for sure, yes, the Americans, they seem to have some leverage now. They can impose secondary sanctions, as they said, on all the countries that are trading with Iran. But the control mechanisms are going to be very difficult to establish because, yes, there is now the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, but what are they going to do about the Caspian Sea, because the Caspian Sea remains a gap and the Americans cannot do anything about that. And the trade can flow from there. Russia can support Iran as it always does. So yes, the secondary sanctions are going to be a tough thing to do, but also we have to understand the Chinese moment here. China is a country that has a big trade volume with USA, and it's going to be really interesting to look how this is going to turn out with China. Chinese just a few months ago they ordered not to comply with US sanctions. They ordered their companies, everyone, and it's going to be really very interesting to see how it goes.
I'm glad you brought up some of the partners to Iran. Beijing has come out to say they do not accept these unilateral sanctions against the countries that do form partnership with Iran. How do you think that's going to pan out? I know you've said that they've told some of their companies not to foster those sanctions.
All right. So look, I'm going to just outline how it works. The US announces that it's going to impose sanctions on all the countries that trade with Iran. So if China has a hypothetical company that is trading with Iran, because China obviously is one of the main importers of Iranian oil. So this company gets notification from the US side that Iran is under sanctions now. If you continue trading with it, you're going to be under risk of imposition of sanctions. So in this case, China is going to see what is the Chinese company, what is more important for them, what is more risky for them to continue or not, or otherwise they will lose the access to American financial system. So it's going to be, this fight against the risks.
Now, I want to bring in the human element to this conflict, because at the end of the day, whenever there's a war taking place, it's the human beings, it's the citizens on the ground that get affected. A News has been running a story here talking to Tehran citizens about the economic impact. You mentioned that they have suffered sanctions from the US before, but then the citizens on the ground are feeling the economic pressure, rising food prices. How long do you think they can hold on?
Yes, indeed. The people are suffering. There's been a rise of poverty. The educational system suffers because people, they had no internet, so even they had no possibility to study online, the inflation, etc. But does this necessarily mean that the governmental system is shaking? No, I don't think so. Maybe the people are suffering, but the system is there. It's feeling quite good. And I think that, yes, President Trump can say many things. He already promised to destroy Iran totally, but already we've heard these for half a year, like 6 months, but nothing close to the destroyment of Iran happened so far. Yes, the people are suffering, but I think that we're gonna see some more difficulties for the people, not necessarily for the government, because they, as I said, have very good shock absorption, abilities.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. Now, I want us to move on then to the disruptions on the Strait of Hormuz. How significant is the new level of disruptions at this particular stage of the war?
Yes, speaking about Hormuz, we cannot say that it is totally blocked, because so far, yes, there was some cargo going through. I mean, mostly the ships, the vessels, they are using the Omani zone. Yes, the cargo is not of the same volume as it was before war, but still a significant portion of the ships are trying to use the Omani zone, and of course convoyed by the US military ships. Backed by US military ships. Usually they try to do it at night with transponders turned off, so the Iranians cannot track them. But yes, we can also say that some portion of ships is using still the northern part, the Iranian zone. Yes, they're going through a lot of inspections, a lot of checks. But then again, the situation is like this. We cannot say that it is totally blocked.
Yeah, but there is a dramatic drop in the traffic, though, on the Strait of Hormuz. I wonder then, what does this mean about Iran's ability to control the strait? Because as you've said, President Trump has many statements that he has uttered before, including one that the US controls the strait, but on the other hand, you have Iran now saying they do control a portion of the strait. This dramatic drop in traffic, what does it mean about Iran's control?
Yes, indeed, there is a dramatic drop because the vessels, they're being very careful now. They try not to risk the insurance. They're having insurance problems. The costs of insurance have risen, and also, the Americans, they're saying that the Iranian naval fleet is totally destroyed, but we have to also remember that they still possess small fleet that is so-called mosquito fleet, and it still accumulates certain capacity to cause some trouble for those vessels who do not comply the Iranian rules that they're currently imposing.
Speaking about Iran's control of the strait to some extent, they're also threatening fines, they're threatening detention and confiscation of vessels. Is Tehran now trying to formalize the control of the Strait of Hormuz in terms of who passes through?
Yes, indeed. They've been having talks with Oman recently to formalize these bilateral agreements of controlling the strait. And we've also heard that President Trump has warned Oman, and warned in a very serious way, not to go for it. And I think these warnings can be taken seriously because, maybe Iran is a big country for the US to deal with, but Oman, if we look at the map, is like, of course, as compared to Iran, is an easy thing to deal with when it comes to these warnings. So I think that there will not be much progression regarding this, and also this will create a new reality regarding the international maritime law. So we're going to see how it goes.
So despite the disruptions and who claims to control the Strait of Hormuz, why do you think some vessels are still willing to pass through?
I think that the vessels that are passing through are relying on US protection. Yeah, of course, every vessel takes its own personal risk. It's a matter of money. It's a matter of, the remuneration. So the crew, the captains, the companies, all of them assess it individually. There is no, collective mechanism of deciding, are we going to do this or not? So every vessel takes its own personal decisions, and I think that it's on their own risk.
So how much more can Gulf producers maintain exports with everything that's happening currently?
Well, the Gulf states, of course, are now suffering colossal losses. They're now trying to diversify their routes. Some countries are feeling themselves more comfortable, like Oman, Saudi Arabia. Some have, suffered more significantly. Countries like Qatar, Iraq, United Arab Emirates. Some countries physically lost the ability to export oil. Some just had some, technical troubles. But I can say that now they're trying to restructure the whole approach. Some of them are trying to invest in reviving the old pipelines. Some are building new pipelines. And I think that this will take a long time because it is also a very costly process, as you may know. And we also will see about that.
Well, that's tricky. If it's going to take a long time, then how much do these alternative routes, how can they maintain the pressure then?
Well, they can maintain a pressure by simply, for now, using the Strait of Hormuz, but of course with the low volume. And also they can use some land, ways to export. But this is the thing now. This is very tricky now, and that is the thing. That is why they're being very nervous now about the whole export.
Yeah. So I wonder then, what is the biggest vulnerability here? Is it the availability of oil? Is it the cost of transporting it? Is it the ability to insure? You spoke of insurance, and to move it. What is really the vulnerability?
I think the core idea, the core problem is the ability to physically move. Because all the other problems, they arise from this problem, this main problem, the ability to move the oil. Even I can say that in the beginning, President Trump set the maximum goal is to get to the point that Iran renounces its enrichment of uranium. But now this became the minimum goal. The maximum goal for Americans, both diplomatically and military, is to open the Strait of Hormuz. And so the physical movement of oil is very important.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Tural Akhundov, a research fellow at the Crescent Research Center, joining me in studio. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Now, the United States has removed Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism, a move Damascus says could help reconnect the country with the global financial system and attract investment.
The United States has removed Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism, a decision Damascus says could remove a major obstacle to foreign investment and economic recovery. The move follows the completion of a 45-day congressional review period after Washington announced its intention to rescind the designation.
We hope that removing this final obstacle will also open the way, improve the economic situation, and reconnect Syria to the global financial and economic system. This would also help increase investments in Syria and increase influx into the country.
Syria had been on the list since 1979. Syrian officials say the decision could encourage investment, improve banking ties, and support reconstruction efforts after years of conflict and economic restrictions. The designation had restricted foreign assistance, defence-related exports and certain financial transactions, creating challenges for companies and banks considering business with Syria.
Now, President Ahmed al-Sharaa says Syria is now leaving behind a very painful chapter that Washington removed it from the state sponsors of terrorism list. Speaking in a video message on Monday, he said the move would help the country pursue development, reconstruction and rebuilding. He concluded by thanking US President Donald Trump and other countries for their support.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. Today, Syria is shaking off a dark burden and tearing out a painful chapter of its past to embark on a path of development, reconstruction, and rebuilding. Great people of Syria, you have done it again. The sanctions have been lifted and the restrictions removed. I ask God Almighty to help us serve you.
Meanwhile, oil prices steadied on Tuesday despite Monday's news of sanctions on Iran. Yesterday, oil prices fell more than $2 a barrel. Brent crude slipped to 0.1% to $92.08 a barrel, while U.S. crude edged to 0.1% higher to $85.09. Investors are weighing the risk of further supply disruptions against hopes that tougher economic pressure could help ease the conflict. Colombian President Abelardo de la Espriella has pledged further support for communities hit by a deadly earthquake in the west of the country 2 weeks ago. On Monday, he visited affected areas in Choco and Valle del Cauca, heading out reconstruction certificates to victims. He said 480 tons of building materials had arrived in the country's northwestern region, with distribution starting immediately. The 7.4 magnitude quake has killed 329 people, including 4,592, and left at least 234 missing.
We have to get to work right now, dear compatriots. There is no time to lose. Let us decide quickly and start working. The machinery that arrived today in Quibdó is a clear signal that this process is not a promise. It is a reality, and this place is starting to become a point of action. Today, the delivery of the first 480 tons of materials begins, so that recovery begins now, and not months from now.
After the break, we'll discuss the rest of this morning's global stories. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak now. Let's have a look at the rest of those global stories. France and Saudi Arabia have agreed to build a $7 billion Magna-themed amusement park near Paris. The project, inspired by the popular Japanese animation franchise Dragon Ball Z, is expected to create around 22,000 jobs. The agreement was announced during Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to France, where he and President Emmanuel Macron witnessed the signing of the deal. Now, cross-border attacks between Russia and Ukraine are escalating, with both sides targeting key logistics and supply routes. Moscow says it has hit a cargo ship at a Ukrainian port, while Kyiv has launched a wave of drone strikes deep inside southern Russia. The intensifying violence comes as the United Nations Security Council faces stark warnings about the mounting civilian toll of the war.
Satellite images reveal the aftermath of Ukrainian drone strikes on major logistics hubs owned by the Russian e-commerce giant Ozon. The recent attacks sparked massive fires in Dagestan and Krasnodar, sending the retailer's shares tumbling. At the same time, Russia's defense ministry says its forces struck a cargo vessel in Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa, claiming the ship was delivering military supplies. The escalating cross-border exchanges formed a bitter backdrop to a tense session at the United Nations Security Council in New York. UN humanitarian officials warn diplomats that the relentless use of weaponized drones is devastating frontline communities.
In Kherson, I witnessed how drone warfare is dismantling civilian life. The area has become a dystopian landscape of kill zones and kamikaze drones, with roads and buildings draped in anti-drone netting.
The United States and its European allies used the meeting to press for an immediate ceasefire and a return to negotiations. But Russia's UN ambassador firmly rejected calls for a temporary halt to the fighting and accused Western nations of using civilian vessels to smuggle weapons into Ukraine.
Any attempts to impose on us a freeze on the conflict under the guise of a ceasefire are doomed to failure. As long as we are addressed in the language of ultimatums, terror and threats, there will be no basis for a meaningful political and diplomatic dialogue.
However, Ukraine's representative warned that civilians remain exposed to relentless Russian ballistic missile attacks. He demanded that allies immediately release defensive weapons currently sitting in storage.
I once again urge all our partners to take the only right decision today to provide Ukraine with all the available Patriot interceptor missiles currently held in stockpiles.
Kyiv is also proposing a global coalition to massively scale up interceptor production to shield its skies. Analysts say that, with Moscow rejecting a ceasefire on current terms and both sides expanding their strike zones, the prospects for a diplomatic breakthrough seem distant.
British Prime Minister Andy Burnham has reaffirmed London's steadfast support for Ukraine during his first overseas trip since taking office. Meeting President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv on the country's Independence Day, Burnham promised the UK's commitment would not waver. The diplomatic push coincides with a new pledge from Britain and France to significantly accelerate military backing.
And I felt it was important to come on this, my first overseas visit since coming into office, because previous Prime Ministers have been here, and my predecessor Keir was a big supporter, helped bring about the coalition of the willing. I felt I needed to come to make sure that you knew and the people know that there's no change in Britain's support. You know, we will not be here today, gone tomorrow. You know, we will be there for you.
Russia and Ukraine have carried out a prisoner exchange, with both sides releasing 10 people each, according to Belarusian state media. The swap was reportedly facilitated through Belarus, which has hosted previous prisoner exchanges between Moscow and Kyiv. The exchange comes as part of ongoing efforts between the two sides to return captured personnel. The EU has approved 6.1 billion euros in new defense funding for Ukraine as Kyiv presses for more support to meet its wider financial and security needs. The package will cover air defense systems, missiles, ammunition, and radars. But President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv still needs 30 billion euros in EU loans this year to cover its budget gap, plus $27 billion for defense. He also rules out an alternative to NATO membership. Norway is pushing back against Europe's pressure to limit Arctic drilling, saying oil and gas production remains vital for energy security. Anita Sharma reports from the Netherlands.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where Norway takes a firmer approach to its energy relationship with Europe. Energy Minister Terje Aasland says Norway will continue developing oil and gas resources in the Barents Sea, regardless of whether the EU maintains its opposition to new Arctic drilling. Norway became Europe's biggest supplier of natural gas after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and now meets around 30% of gas demand in the EU and Britain. But Norwegian production is forecast to fall sharply after 2030 unless new fields are discovered. And Oslo says the Barents Sea will be essential to keeping output near current levels through at least 2035. Now, the EU has opposed new Arctic drilling on environmental grounds, although energy security concerns have prompted Brussels to reconsider its position. And if Europe ultimately wants less Norwegian oil and gas, Norway says it has other buyers. The CEO of Equinor, the country's largest energy company, says Arctic oil and liquefied natural gas can be sold elsewhere. The shift also extends to electricity. Osland has rejected the idea that Norway should become Europe's, quote, green battery, using its hydropower to support a more integrated European electricity market. That integration has exposed Norwegian consumers and industry to higher and more volatile power prices, fueling political resistance at home. Norway says it will not build new interconnectors while maintaining cooperation with Europe's power market. Osland is also calling on European countries to strengthen reliable electricity supply after coal and nuclear plant closures and limited investment in new gas-fired generation. He says that would help lower prices and create a more balanced two-way flow of electricity between Norway and the rest of Europe. It all points to a broader reset in Norway's energy relationship with Europe, still a crucial partner, but increasingly unwilling to subordinate its own economic and energy interests to the continent's green transition. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Now, a landslide at Dar es Salaam landfill in Guinea's capital, Conakry, has killed around 30 people and injured 22 others after heavy rains triggered the collapse. Residents say several families lost loved ones, with rescue teams continuing efforts to recover and identify victims. Authorities say they are providing assistance to those affected by the disaster. The incident occurred less than a week after the government announced plans to close the site and relocate the waste. A wildfire has broken out near the city of Trapani on the Italian island of Sicily. The flames spread along the slopes of Mount Polizzo. Aerial firefighting operations were launched to contain the blaze. 3 helicopters and 2 firefighting aircrafts were deployed. Now to a quick break. When I return, I'll discuss our regional stories. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on A News, and thank you for staying with me this morning. Now let's turn to the region. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has visited some of Bukhara's most important landmarks as part of the second day of the president's official visit to Uzbekistan. Accompanied by Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, the leaders and their families visited the historic Ismail Samani Mausoleum and the Ak Fortress. The fortress is more than 2,000 years old and now houses the Bukhara State Museum Reserve. Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan are taking their strategic partnership to a new level. It's after President Ilham Aliyev's visit to Tashkent, which brought a new treaty of eternal friendship and fresh plans to boost trade, investment, and regional connectivity.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev held talks in Tashkent on Sunday during Aliyev's state visit to Uzbekistan, setting new targets for trade, investment, and regional cooperation. The two leaders met at the Kuksaroy state residence following an official welcome ceremony. Speaking at the third meeting of the Supreme Interstate Council, Mirziyoyev said relations between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan had reached a historic high.
I have been informed that out of $500 million, approximately $160 million have already been allocated. Naturally, I believe we will utilize these funds soon and define new avenues of cooperation. I must also mention that Azerbaijan has such formats of cooperation with various countries. However, I would say that the most efficient and results-oriented fund is precisely the Uzbekistan-Azerbaijan Investment Fund.
The two presidents signed a treaty on eternal friendship, further strengthening ties between the two countries. The leaders adopted a roadmap aimed at raising annual bilateral trade to $1 billion. Mirziyoyev said trade between the two countries had tripled over the past 5 years.
At the heart of our relations lies a shared civilizational code, common historical roots, centuries-old friendship, unbreakable spiritual values, and similar culture and traditions. It is this deep-rooted bond that makes our relations solid and invulnerable to external conditions.
They also discussed expanding joint projects, with the current investment portfolio exceeding $5 billion across sectors including energy, industry, construction, agriculture and finance. Transport cooperation was also high on the agenda, including plans for a joint Caspian shipping fleet and expanded transit routes.
Now for more on that regional story, I'm joined by Zhanat Momynkulov, a political analyst in Astana, Kazakhstan. Hello and welcome to the program.
Hi dear, thank you for the invite.
So the treaty has been signed and the political relationship is clearly very strong. But what is really the first test of whether this eternal friendship can actually deliver strategically?
I think this visit was very important for Central Asia. You know that Azerbaijan has recently become very active in Central Asia. So the most important step was Azerbaijan's full participation in the Central Asian format. Mr. Aliyev takes part in the different kind of summits in Central Asia. So the relationship between Central Asia and Azerbaijan becomes more cordial. So this followed by deeper ties with Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and other regional states, with strong focus on transport, energy, investment, and other sectors. So I think that Baku is now increasing its positioning, not only as Caspian Sea, as Aliyev said, it is becoming like a part of broader Central Asia, a bridge between Central Asia and Caucasus, Turkey, and Europe. So the Aliyev's visit to Tashkent is the most visible expression of this strategy. So I think that the cordial relationship between Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan will be tested by time and future challenges, which could not be denied, of course, because Uzbekistan has no direct border bridge with Caspian Sea. Of course, we're talking about the regional scope, right? Because Uzbekistan will work with Kazakhstan, Kazakh ports, and the Turkmen ports to reach Caspian Sea, and then Azerbaijan. So we're talking about the systemic regional, relationship. So in this framework, Uzbek-Azerbaijan relations are very important, not only for the Turkic world, but at the same time, the creation of these land corridors and interconnections and, of course, interdependence.
So, Mr. Momynkulov, I want to find out then, is Baku seeking markets in Central Asia, or is it seeking political influence as well?
So I think Azerbaijan needs Central Asian markets. Azerbaijan needs to invest in some facilities in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. So this will create the interdependence. So I think that these relationships are very important in terms of the Turkic bounds as well. But we're talking about the pragmatic issues, right? we're talking about investments and trade and transport and new bridges through Caspian Sea. So Aliyev wants to intensify these bonds and connections. So I think Uzbekistan can add and put its efforts into the creation of the intra-regional connectivity, Central Asia plus Caucasus, right? So we're talking about the diversification rather than the dependence on one direction. So what we see is that we need to develop the middle corridor, which starts from China through Central Asia, Caspian Sea. So in my view, what is the geopolitical significance of this relationship, this rapprochement among the middle powers in Central Asia and Caucasus? Recently, Financial Times named Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan as small and middle powers, right? So this is crucial. This is crucial because it constitutes the backbone of the Eurasian land bridge, right? So in my view, the big picture is that Central Asia and Caucasus are becoming more interconnected, and Uzbekistan needs diversified access to the European markets, and Azerbaijan needs Central Asian cargo and markets, and and Kazakhstan also provides a critical part of the Trans-Caspian infrastructure. So we are seeing now the emergence of this Central Asia plus Caspian Caucasus economic space.
So what I'm getting from you is the key strategic partnership and how significant it is then for the region. Could Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan emerge as the two key connectors between Central Asia and the South Caucasus? I know you've cited the Financial Times.
Yes, Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan are very interesting states of the region. I always highlighted and emphasized that these two countries, which are not members of the Collective Security Organization or the other blocs, they're neutral, they're more independent than the other Central Asian countries. So I think that this connection between Tashkent and Baku will create a new dynamic in the region, not only in the framework of the Turkic states organization and the other Central Asian formats. So in my view, three countries are crucial, as I said: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan. Now they're assessed as middle powers. This is very important. Some scholars from America said that to which direction these crucial central states in Eurasia will, turn their, attention, the global balance will change. I mean, there are Mongolia, we're talking about Pakistan, we're talking about these 7 or so states, including these 3 or 2 countries we're talking about. So they're independent, and geographically they're positioned very in a very important space. So I think that if the central countries in Central Eurasia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, they can solve the middle power issue, I think the new geopolitical center might emerge. So we can emerge as a bridge between China and Europe, Middle East and Russia. So in this case, the peace and stability will prevail, because everybody, including the larger powers, I mean China and the United States, will be interested in the stability. So I think that Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan and other regional countries can protect this infrastructure from the point of view of strategic stability and security and interoperability. So this is very crucial for the global corridor geopolitics, because now we see that the northern corridor through Russia are closed, and the Strait of Hormuz faces geopolitical risks. So the only stable or potential the passage, the corridor, remain the middle corridor, which is Trans-Caspian route. So I think that we need to engage greater powers in these discussions. So what Azerbaijan tries to do with development with Central Asian country is to intensify these bonds and connections so that we have very little time to use this opportunity, because in next 2 or 5 years, if the Ukrainian conflict or the Iranian conflict will finish, the importance of the middle corridor might also change. So this is a crucial moment for us to benefit from this moment and to engage with each other and to integrate other players like Georgia, Armenia, and other countries. So we are talking about the web and network of different competing sometimes corridors, north, south, east, west. So in this term, we're at the beginning of the process. We're at the beginning of something big. So Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan plays crucial role in this global transformation.
Mr. Zhanat Momynkulov, that's all we have time for this morning. Thank you once again for joining us on Daybreak right here on A News.
Thank you.
Now, Kazakhstan's first vote for its new parliament has produced a strong early lead for the pro-presidential Adilet party as the country prepares for a major change to its political system. Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
5 political parties are projected to enter Kazakhstan's new Kurultai, according to preliminary results released by the Central Election Commission. Adilet is leading with nearly 72% of the vote, far ahead of the other parties. Adilet is a new pro-presidential party formed earlier this year. It was later joined by Amanat, previously Kazakhstan's largest political party. Parties need at least 5% of the vote to enter parliament. Turnout was just over 74%, with more than 9.3 million people voting. There are still preliminary figures. The Central Election Commission is expected to announce the final results within 10 days of the vote. Meanwhile, international observers described the Kurultai elections as fair and open, saying they found no violations that could have affected their results. The Kurultai will have 145 lawmakers elected through party lists for 5-year terms. But this election is about more than a new parliament. Kazakhstan is also changing the structure of its political system. The previous 2-chamber parliament is being replaced by a single-chamber Kurultai, which will have a greater role in key government decisions and in holding the government to account. The new Kurultai will have a bigger say in key appointments, including the Prime Minister, Vice President, and members of the Constitutional Court. It will also have stronger powers to oversee the government, including the ability to express no confidence in individual ministers. That makes the role of the Speaker particularly important, as legislative power will now be concentrated in a single chamber. And once the Kurultai begins its work, the current government must step down within 2 months of the first session. The president must also appoint the vice president, a position restored under the amended constitution with the parliament's approval. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
All right, that's the news for this morning. Thank you for joining me, Tim Tongana, and the Daybreak team. Stay tuned to all our streaming platforms on YouTube and the A News website, and be sure to follow us on all our social media pages. Goodbye.